Welcome to Adrenalin Exotics. This isn't just the only exotic car showroom in Central Alberta. It is also a fantastic place to work and a place packed with about $3.5 million worth of very, very cool cars. I recently started working here a couple of months ago, which is a big reason why I haven't been putting out as much content as I'd like, but we're working on changing that, and what better way to do that than go for a little walkthrough of all the cars we've currently got in the collection and show you guys what we got. Walking around this place is honestly one of the most stimulating experiences a guy can get. There is just so much cool stuff going on in here. This place is so aesthetically pleasing. I absolutely love it, and it has become one of my most favorite places to spend some time. Not just because of the aesthetics, but also because of all the cars. Currently, we have about 20 cars hanging out in here, and there's a few more that are kind of here, there, and everywhere, just as getting serviced, having some minor work done, things like that. Just normal stuff to upkeep a fleet of cars this large. As it sits, there's approximately $3.5 million worth of cars sitting in this room, and I think that is pretty fantastic. Starting up front, we've got this Audi R8 V10 Plus. See, this is the newer generation, very similar to the Huracans. These are so comfortable. It's like getting yourself into a Lambo, just a little bit less flashy. Unfortunately, this is after they were available with the gated manual, so it is just an auto, but it does have this V10 in the back. It is a super beautiful and absolutely stunning car. Tons of carbon, tons of good bits here, there, and everywhere. Super curious. I haven't actually driven this car. At some point we'll have to do a little comparing between this and the Huracan, because I am curious to see how much differentiation there is between the two cars. Moving on down the line, we've got a 2012 PDK 911 Carrera S. This thing is in fantastic shape. Kind of a funky spec. It might not be for everybody, but it is a very beautiful car. I'm kind of a sucker for brown interiors, so I'm a little bit biased. And I mean, if it was me personally, I'd probably be going for a stick, but the PDKs are so good in these cars, and honestly, it pulls together as a very damn nice package. Things in really good shape. I'm actually pretty stoked to take this for a drive too. I've been in a couple of Porsches now through work and whatever else, but I haven't gotten an opportunity to drive a proper 911, and I'm pretty stoked about that. That one will be an exciting one to take out for a little bit of a boot. We've got a 2006 Z06 Supercharged Vet here, and this thing is insane. I know a couple of months ago, we went and took delivery with our buddy Taylor of his Supercharged Vet. We still haven't gone for a drive in that, but this is actually pretty similar. It's another Davenport build, another Supercharged Z06. It's a little bit less crazy because it's not methanol injected, and it's not set up with a full drag pack and whatever else. Even this, I've taken it for a little bit of a lap, just moving things around, shuffling around our inventory, putting different things on display in different places. And this thing is absolutely insane. The amount of chop that it's got and the amount of just sheer anger that it has will take you off your feet. These things are pretty nutty. Again, another really fun car, especially if you're into the domestic side of things. These are pretty hard to beat. About the only thing that might have them beat is this. We've got a 2005 Copperhead Edition SRT 10 Viper. Obviously, I haven't actually owned a Viper myself, but I have owned a Viper truck. And the engines in these, they're so raw. It's really hard to describe without actually being in one and taking for a drive. Even taking this for a little bit of a loop to go fuel it up, make sure it's all clean and whatever else. These are just such a raw driving experience. I can understand why so many of them have been crashed. Obviously, that is one of the things that this car is famous for, is being wrapped around a pole. But honestly, if you know what you're doing, even a little bit, they are a ton of fun, and they're such a raw driving experience. There isn't very many cars. In fact, I'm struggling to think of any right now that are like this with a naturally aspirated V10, let alone one that's got 8.3 liters of displacement. But even if we set that aside for a moment, there's not much out there with naturally aspirated V10, rear-wheel drive, manual transmission. Like, this is such a pure driving experience. And it's crazy to drive these back to back and see the little differences and whatever else. You do kind of have a little bit two sides of the same coin. Of course, the Z06 is definitely faster because it's supercharged and has a whole bunch of goodies. But these cars are very similar driving experiences, and they're very raw, especially this. I really quite like that. They're not the most sophisticated, they're not the most techie, but they are a ton of fun to drive. Moving on over, we've got our GLE 450. Honestly, these things are just super luxurious. This one is spec'd in a full white interior, And if I'm not mistaken, it is loaded to the absolute nines with about anything and everything possible to get in one of these super, super luxurious, super, super nice. I was gonna say, not exactly my cup of tea, but a very, very nice car for what it is, especially if you're in the market for a luxury SUV. The newer Mercedes stuff is just crazy. We don't have it anymore, but we had a GT63 AMG, which is kind of like their, I don't know, the Grand Touring, absolutely insano sports car that's a lot of luxury, but also a lot of performance. And I've never been a huge Mercedes guy. I got in that car to move it around, the GT63. It blew my freaking mind because the newer Mercedes stuff is just such spaceship-like. Like all the ambient lighting inside, all the beautiful touches, all the materials inside. If you ask me, going for, I don't know, the older, like decade and older Mercedes stuff, which I'm not gonna lie, I've thought about getting myself a C63 a couple times. The newer stuff is just so hard to beat when you compare it to all its rivals. And this is definitely no different for what it is. If you've seen the channel, this is a car that you're definitely familiar with. I absolutely love this thing. It's kind of a little bit of a pain in the butt. It's small, it's a little bit clunky, as all Gallardos are, but damn does it have a soul. It's a pre-LP, old school Gallardo Spyder. It's in fantastic shape. Obviously, Giallo Midas color. It is absolutely beautiful. I don't know. I know a lot of people don't like yellow cars. I absolutely love the color of this, especially when you come and look at it in person. If you haven't seen this color, you don't really know how to describe it, but it is such a deep, sparkly yellow that just looks so good. Since this car is a pre-LP car, it's the older 5-liter V10 instead of the newer 5.2, which is in all the post-LP cars. It sounds absolutely fantastic because it's straight piped. It's got a couple other goodies. These things are a ton of fun to drive. A person doesn't really understand how small these cars are until you see one in person. Like, they're really not big, either inside or outside. Of course, being a Spyder helps a ton with headroom, but comparing this back to back with any of the Huracans, I don't know, they're a little less maneuverable because, of course, they're bigger, but they are so much more comfortable and easy to use, especially because these are optioned with single clutch transmissions or e-gear transmissions if they are not gated manuals, which unfortunately this one is not, but don't write it off. They are still a ton of fun to drive. Honestly, before I got my SMG or single clutch M6, I didn't think I was gonna like a single clutch car whatsoever. You hear all the negative reviews, you hear all the bad things said about flappy paddle gearboxes, but to be completely honest, they are so much fun to drive. If you're looking for raw speed comparing to newer stuff, it doesn't really quite get there. They do fall short of the mark. Damn, they are so much fun to drive. They are so dramatic. A little terrifying, especially in these in parking lots, but comes with the territory, and they are a ton of fun. Going one step above, we've got an automatic drop top V8 R8. These cars are such a bargain for what they are. Like, I'm gonna be completely honest, sooner rather than later, I'm very much hoping that I'll be in territory to buy my first proper exotic car. Something like the M6 kind of counts, but it just doesn't quite have the level of bravado that I think is required to be a supercar, especially when you consider that it's on the regular 6 Series platform. But I've actually thought about these a couple times because you can get these so cheap, and for what you're getting, they're so fantastic. They're not the most brutal, they're not the most insane, but they are proper exotic cars, and you can get yourself a V8 R8 for very cheap. Like, at least around here, this one is definitely a bit above that, but if you're looking for a worse example, maybe something with a bad history, maybe something with some more mileage and whatever else, you can start finding these in that $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 Canadian range, which, aside from like an R35 GTR, there isn't really anything super exotic that you can get at that price point. This particular one's in great shape. Actually kind of stoked. I'd love to take this for a drive. This is one of the few cars in here that I haven't had really any experience with. I'll be stoked to go for a little bit of loop, and maybe at some point we'll do an R8 versus Gallardo comparison video. Let me know below if that's something that you guys would like to see. Moving down the line, we have a couple more of my favorites. See, this and this are almost identical. I like the yellow exterior a bit better, but the white on black interior in this car looks way better. These two cars are both very similar. The black one is an 08 rather than an 06. But aside from that, also an E-Gear pre-LP 5-liter V10 car. Fantastic shape. Very similar to this. Honestly, just kind of comes down to color preferences and spec preferences, and Beyond that, these things are just a ton of fun to drive. I can't go over the top with that enough. They're not the fastest things, but they are so much fun, and they're so special to drive. Moving from these two over to this one, and now this guy right here. This is a very cool car. Honestly, I'm really stoked. All of a sudden, we went from having 0 Gen 5 Vipers to now we've got 3. There's this one, that one, and then we've got another one over there, which we will get to. But they're such cool cars, and I would love to have one someday. Especially the ACR Extremes are just beautiful cars. I have always loved these Gen 5 Vipers. We've got 2 of them right now in yellow. Both of them GTSs, both of them extremely low mileage. This one's a little bit more option than this one. This one's got the carbon fiber splitters. It's got carbon fiber everywhere, and it's a little hard to see with it up on the hoist, but there's carbon fiber trim across the back. We've got the upgraded spec'd wheels and a handful of other oddball things that spec this one a bit higher than that one over there, but they're such fantastic cars. Where else are you gonna find a domestic 8.4 liter V10 with a traditional 6-speed manual gearbox, rear wheel drive, the thickest rear tires you've ever seen in your life? Like, I don't know, these cars are just such unicorns. We'll never see anything like them again. Like big, naturally aspirated, manual transmission driver's cars. And again, they're known to be slightly terrifying to drive in that they are just difficult. They are not easy to drive. They are not meant to be easy to drive. And that's part of what makes them so fun. Like, especially as you get up in the trim levels, like, I don't know if anybody's seen any of the videos or any of the journalism about the ACR Extremes or like the super track oriented versions of these cars. They are insane. Like, seeing what the lap times these are capable of churning up, even a GTS like this as compared to like an ACR, which commands massive dollars, these are just supposed to be some of the most fun, raw things to drive. And I haven't actually gotten to take one of the Gen 5s out just yet, but even just moving them around the showroom and feeling the rumble as they start up, it is an experience. I don't know how else to put it. These cars are very expensive for what they are, and at some point I'm gonna have to add one to my garage. I think they are so cool, but not quite yet with the premium that these cost, because of course we're never gonna see anything like it again, and they are appreciating massively in value. Which is great if you own one, great if you're in the market for one, not great if you're this guy and you would love to own one and know you're not gonna for a good while. But all part of the fun, I guess. Moving onward, everybody knows what this is. We've got ourselves a G-Wagon, and yes, it is a proper G63 AMG. These things are so popular. It's really funny, because of all the stuff in this showroom, if you take it out for a drive, believe it or not, this seems to command some of the most attention of anything in here. The G-Wagon has become such an icon of society. It is such a status symbol. I don't know, personally, it's not my choice. I'm not a Jeep guy either. I'm not one for the boxy feel or look, but everybody loves the way these look. These things are super comfortable. They are super fast for what they are. When you have a proper AMG bi-turbo V8 under the hood, they're just cool. I don't know. It's not necessarily my kind of cool, but I can recognize that these are just plain cool. And to go one step further with that, you can see you get a newer G-Wagon, you're looking at $200,000 to $300,000 Canadian. You look at this, which is a 15, slightly older, only $100,000. Which I know, only $100,000 is kind of a bold statement, but when you're comparing what you're getting with something like this, even to a new G-Wagon, and like the amount of bravado that comes with, not bad. Not for me, but not bad at all. Moving onwards, like I say, we've got our other Viper GTS up here in yellow. This one, as I mentioned, you can see the wheels are different on this versus this. It's got a lot less carbon, but it is a very similar spec car and actually is the same exterior color as our one across over there. As I mentioned, these things are beautiful. I'm pretty stoked to take one of these for a drive. Let me know in the comments down below what you'd like to see me do with the Vipers. Do you want to see an old Viper versus new Viper video? Do you want me to compare it to any of the other V10 cars in here? Let me know what you're thinking. Moving onward, we've got kind of a funny story with this car and this car. They actually came both from the same collector. He had the pair of them. They're both right around 15,000 kilometers. They are both black drop-top DB9s with the 5.9 liter V12 under the hood. These things are both in fantastic shape. They came from the same guy. And it's kind of funny because this was his two major cars in his collection. And it doesn't make sense to me that if you're gonna get two exotic cars, you decide to get one and one that are almost identical, just a few years newer than each other. But I guess if you know what you like, you know what you like, and there's nothing wrong with that. I actually drove the 08 back when we picked this thing up. These things are so much fun to drive. It's not exotic the same way this is exotic. This thing doesn't want to kill you. It's not super angry. It doesn't burble and crackle when you downshift. If you're looking for something that's kind of low-key but luxurious as hell, super nice to drive, super smooth to drive, you can't really beat this. Like the V12 under this hood, it runs so smooth. I don't know how they balance so good and run as smooth as they do, but they are just the smoothest things on the road, both in terms of how they run, how they drive, and yet if you drop a couple gears and let her go, they have a lot to give, and they have everything you could ever need. Shifting gears, this is another car that we might be familiar with. This is the blue Aegeus 2022 Huracan Evo that we actually did a video on right here. This car is so much fun. Being that it's a rear-wheel drive Huracan, it's a blast. Of course, these cars have so much mechanical grip because the engine is over the rear wheels that the rear-wheel drive, if you ask me, is the way to go. It makes it a touch more lively and a little bit more fun that way. Nothing wrong with the all-wheel drive cars whatsoever, but I do like the rear-wheel drive ones a ton. This car is spec'd in such a cool color. I know we've talked about that a couple times and talked about that a good bit in the video we made with this car. But it is so hard to believe, and no one ever does believe, that this is actually factory Lamborghini paint. This is an ad personam option. This is something that you have to pay a bit extra to get, and there's not many of them, but it is a factory Lambo option. I think this car is seriously beautiful, and this color just makes this car. Taking this thing for a bit of a drive, there's a reason that these are kind of the Civics of supercars. They're super reliable. With the rear wheel steering that these have, it is super easy to maneuver and drive wherever you want. They always start up and go. They're simple, they're fun, and honestly, of all the cars in here, this is one of the most dailyable cars, and I think that says a lot of good things. You got nose lift, you got all the creature comforts you could want, all your Bluetooth and everything else that makes this car super easy to drive, and makes me a little bit jealous that I gotta look at it every day without being able to drive it every day. Moving onward, while we're on the topic of Huracans, obviously this is a newer Evo. This is an older LP610-4, standing for 610 metric horsepower, which translates, I believe, to about 603 imperial horsepower, which is what we're all familiar with. I don't know why they base their naming scheme off of metric when it seems like everybody uses imperial horsepower, but what can you do? The 4 in 610-4 standing for all-wheel drive. This thing is so menacing. I absolutely love the spec of this car. Obviously, it's lowered, as we can see. It sits super, super low. It does have nose lift, which makes this specific car a bit more practical. It's really highly optioned. It's actually got carbon ceramics, which is something that the blue Huracan doesn't. But this is a wrap, unlike that one, which this is the guest one that everybody thinks is factory versus this. But this is actually wrapped white. It's been done incredibly well. Of course, as we can see, the door jambs have all been done. This inside piece on the door has been done. This is such a beautifully done wrap job. I actually can't believe how well done it is. You have to look so hard, and about the only places you can find it is some areas like this that you can see the original navy blue paint. I personally love the peanut butter colored interior. I think it's super, super classy, and I know I've mentioned this before, but if you're gonna get an exotic car, get something fun for the interior. Don't be that guy who just gets black on black on black. If that's what you really love, I mean, go for it. But personally, I think an exotic car deserves something different for the interior, even if it is just some accenting. But of course, as I mentioned, these things are so, so nice to drive, and they're very, very easy for what they are. Moving onward, we've got a 2023 3LT Corvette. This is a new C8. These things, honestly, driving these things, it's a very weird experience to try and explain, because you can tell that yes, you are indeed in a Chevrolet product, yet it feels, it looks, and it acts very, very exotic. I'd be very curious to try a new Z06. I haven't gotten to try a Z06. I've only driven the non-Z06 variants with still the pushrod V8, and you can definitely tell that the pushrod V8 just doesn't quite have that exotic feel like something like this does. But it is still a blast to drive. It is super, super fast. It's super, super planted. The interior feels very spaceship-like for a Chevy. And this one specifically is spec'd in a pretty cool combo here with the white edges, the yellow seat belts. And when you got kind of this aviation style control panel, it makes this car feel very, very special to drive, especially when you remember that you're in a Corvette, you're in a Chevy product. It doesn't feel right, but that's how it is, and it's a ton of fun to drive. Moving onward, this is something that I'm definitely gonna do some recording with sooner rather than later. This thing's crazy. Like, I know everybody makes fun of the Urus because it is kind of just an Audi RS Q8 with a raging bull on the front of it, but it just looks insane. Like, look at these brakes. This is something that everybody comments when looking at this car. It's just insane. And this one specifically, short of being an S or a Performante, is about as loaded as you can get. Like, I'd have to go back and look at the build sheet, but if I remember correct, this has about $100,000 in options, which is insane. And pretty much all of it is carbon fiber goodies and all the fun stuff. Of course, it's got an aftermarket exhaust and the factory sports exhaust. Comes with both of them from Lamborghini. It's just carbon fiber everywhere. It is a very cool ad personam color. It's the full cream/ivory interior, and it is absolutely beautiful. This is our final Gen 5 Viper. I think this thing is sick. Again, I'm not a huge fan of black when it comes to cars, but this kind of black stripes with the slate gray looks really, really good. And maybe the coolest part of this car is by far the interior. I've seen some of these with the full spec peanut butter, and I don't like it as much. It kind of screams your grandma's couch from 30 years ago. But when you mix it with some of the black accenting, you have the full black dash still, but just the brown stitching and the brown leather/Alcantara seats. This thing is such a cool spec. It's not for everybody again, but personally, I think it is so cool, especially considering if you didn't like the exterior color, but you really wanted the interior color, perfect excuse to buy it, wrap it a different color. But of course, you have to figure a way to match the brown interior, but black or gray in this case is the perfect base for a wrap because it looks good as a background color. Moving onward to the last couple cars that are currently here in-house as a part of the collection, we've got this, which is our 2016 CTS-V. Honestly, these things confuse my brain a lot. They are so lightning fast with the supercharged V8 for what it is. It's weird that it's a sedan. Honestly, it's kind of like my XFR, just newer, nicer, a little easier to get parts, a little more reliable, all that lovely stuff. But this car is super fun to drive. It is super nice inside. Unfortunately, this car is locked, but if we take a look inside, you've got the full Recaro buckets, which are the most comfortable, hug you tight seats you've ever seen. I've always loved factory Recaros, and pretty much everything I've ever sat in that had them, this is no exception. This thing is ridiculously clean. It's got freaking massive brakes. This thing is so much fun to drive. Honestly, if you're looking to kind of stay under the radar but still have something that is absolutely ridiculous, it's kind of like a Corvette, just way more luxurious, 4 doors, a little bit more understated, absolute blast. And the final pièce de résistance, looking through the showroom, this is our 2018 McLaren 720S Performance. This thing is mental. Spec for spec, it's supposed to be about the same as the blue Huracan. This feels so much more savage and so much more fast. And all I've done is take it to go fuel up. We are gonna make a video with this car very soon. I'm stoked for that. But these things are just insane. I don't know how else to describe it. You've got dihedral doors that come up, carbon fiber everywhere, including a full carbon monocoque chassis, twin turbo V8 that makes all the blow off noises, rear wheel drive, carbon ceramic brakes. The active aero in this car is crazy. As you can see, the rear wing, it'll pop up as a full air brake when you're coming to a stop. The interior is just insane. As you can see, the cluster folds down when it's off, or actually there's a little screen on the front of the cluster over there that's only on if you're in track mode, because they figure you don't need as much and you should be concentrating on driving when you're on track in a car like that. It's crazy. Honestly, it is absolutely crazy. This car was meant to compete with the flagship cars. This was McLaren's Super Series car for the time from 2018 till almost current with the new release of the 750S. It was meant to be a competitor to the Aventador, to the F12, or to the F12/812, to all these flagship cars, because this is a McLaren Super Series car for the time, not their Sports Series car. And even though it is in a price bracket and often compared to something like the Huracan Evo, it really kind of is in a league of its own for the price point, and it is just absolutely insane. Thank you guys so much for joining along. I was very happy to be able to take you guys for a little bit of a tour. I've been meaning to do this for a hot minute now. Let me know below what you guys would like to see for videos, comparisons, reviews, take something for a drive. play around with something, let me know. I'm very curious. I appreciate that you're here. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.